All right, we are going to go ahead and kick things off. We have a great session planned for you today. We'll be exploring how artificial intelligence and human intelligence work together to guide better creative and shopper decisions, using behavioral science insights and a few interactive moments along the way. My name is Jenny, and I'm on the marketing team here at SellCheck. Just a few quick housekeeping notes before we begin. Today's session is being recorded, so we'll send you a copy of the recording via email after the webinar. If you have questions during the session, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A tab in the bottom right corner of your screen. We'll leave time at the end to answer those questions. Now, I'm excited to introduce our host and featured expert for today. Lynn Neal is the Global Practice Officer at SellCheck, where he leads our behavioral science capability and its practical application to client and shopper experiences. Prior to SellCheck, Lynn was a Senior Director at Procter & Gamble, serving as a global leader in applying behavioral science to how people shop and decide. Lynn brings together deep human insight with real-world application, making him the perfect guide for today's conversation on combining AI speed with human judgment. Lynn, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thanks a bunch, Jenny, and thanks to all of you for joining today. We do have an exciting session combining artificial intelligence and human intelligence for optimized creative results. How do we get the best of both? Our agenda today is pretty simple. We're going to start with a little interactive piece with you guys. When you have our heat maps in hand, what do we then go do? And we're going to have you guys actively participate in that. Second portion is where we want to strengthen our fundamental AI heat map understanding. We're going to strip away some of the marketing and executional details and kind of look at the heat mapping in agnostic situations and see what kind of results it gives us. And it'll deepen your understanding of how that engine works behind the scenes. Third, we're going to show how we can layer artificial intelligence and human intelligence for a better creative assessment. We're actually going to use another case study that you guys can see, kind of map your way through, and we'll talk about how the things can be used together. And then finally, we'll close with a best of both solution and a call to action for you guys as marketers and leaders in the industry. Let's start with a real world example. What you're seeing here is a key visual. Heineken, the parent company, owns both the Heineken brand and Tecate brand. You can see this was an execution for this key visual they created a couple of years ago. It's talking about their 0.0, a big segment of the market increasing rapidly. So non-alcoholic beverages, and this 2024, starting from 0.0 tastes good, all the flavor, zero alcohol. So as we would do in every SellCheck analysis or optimization process, we would run this through a human vision AI and generate some heat map output. So we're going to share that with you guys. So this would be what we consider the raw heat map. And you can just sort of intuitively understand that when you see the dark red or the orange, that's getting a little more intensity all the way out to the light blue. So we'll see that most of the intensity is around that red star on the Heineken can. We've got a bit in the body of our copy there. If we're actually looking at our areas of interest, our operations group can actually draw shapes around potential areas of interest for the client, and you get the percent likelihood that the viewer is going to see this area and fixate on it in the first second or two, kind of in that instinctive quick window that you have. So here kind of confirms what we show in the raw map, that star, the can, is getting quite a bit of attention. We're actually able to show the visual sequencing as well. So if we converted this raw data into sort of a 1, 2, 3, 4 on intensities, it's just confirming what we saw in the raw heat map. Yes, most of our intentional attention is coming on that can and the star to begin with. Then we kind of glide to the bottom of the can, then over to the headline, then back across. So we have all of this information in hand from our heat mapping, very informative. Now you ask yourself, well, what do we go do? So seeing this, how would we make this run better? Does it need to be improved? If we're going to make some alterations to it, what would we make? I'm going to let you guys look at this a moment. And then Jenny's going to share a poll. So take a look at it. Think about what you might go do if you're looking to optimize this based on the heat map data. And we're going to pop up a poll from you. Jenny's going to pull that up. And Jenny, if you can give folks instructions on what they should do with that poll.
Absolutely. So on the right hand of your screen in the bottom right hand corner, there should be something that says polls. So if you click on that, that should be cute. So you can see the poll and all the different choices to make a recommendation.
Super. Jenny, everybody's able to look at that now?
There
After
should
they
be.
click on polls? Okay, great. So we've given you 5 choices here. This is your chance to make a recommendation, make it stronger. And again, all your choices are kept private here. We're not sharing anything or what anyone said on this, but let me touch on the 5 choices you have. Choice A, well, it's unlikely to work well with 2 brands, so they should eliminate Tecate and make this a single brand execution. Another option to make it better is make the copy bigger so it gets more attention and isn't overwhelmed by the star on the Heineken can. A third choice, shift this so we're showing a lifestyle moment when 0.0 is a good idea, like taking a break from pickleball, for example. A fourth choice, don't change anything. The heat map indicates the beer gets attention, followed closely by the copy block, so working well as is. And then a fifth choice, well, I'm not sure, but I'm not feeling great about any of these answers. So think about what you would change and make your choice on the poll.
We're getting a lot of great responses in.
Super.
Give it a few seconds here to get some more votes.
Great.
But everybody has got an opinion, or they don't say don't
I'm
change
curious
it.
myself. I think all of these are fair options.
All right. It looks like we've got a tie with A and B at 36%. Then that's followed by C and last D.
Okay, great. Super. So down there and down there. Okay, yeah, looks like we touched on all of them. Nobody chose E. So, okay, so we're picking one of the 4 out there. Okay, I'm going to leave you hanging for a little bit. We're going to come back to this and we'll talk through each of these responses and give you a take on it. But before we do that, let's pause for a moment and understand basic heat mapping capabilities in AI. We have been working with human vision heat mapping generating algorithms since 2012 at SellCheck. So we've had to develop a deep understanding ourselves on how to interpret them and how to leverage them. We've held a number of internal trainings just to ensure that our panelist group stays sharp and really leverages what they can do well and where they might have a few little blind spots. Now, one of the things that can kind of cloud an understanding of heat mapping is we're always looking at the ad in the context of the heat map. So what we wanted to do here was kind of strip away the ad itself and just look at some agnostic layouts so you can understand how the heat mapping responds to different situations. Let's start with this first one, for example. It's an even pattern. Okay, so objectively, you look at it and go, okay, those circles are all the same size. We're going to space them out. You're going to space them evenly horizontally, space them evenly vertical. So let's run this through our heat mapping software and look at the output we get. So a couple of observations can be made here. You know, it can see that the closer adjacency on the horizontal causes them to sort of think about that as a group. So you end up with 5 group lines here. But as you might expect, nothing radically pulling the vision around because each of these items is, you know, the exact same, just spaced around evenly. One of the things I want to draw your attention to is that in the center here, you're seeing that those get a little more depth of glow, a little more intensity. And it's one of the things to understand about the human vision AI and particularly how you put in your input visuals. So the heat mapping software itself positions itself perfectly centered on your image, almost like it was human eyes. So it's spacing that distance, it's spacing the left, right, and up, down. So when we don't have anything to draw our attention one way or the other, it will naturally sort of center our vision and give a little more intensity there. On a lot of work we do with packaging or doing with planograms, items like that, where we might have a number of items pulling the vision around, you can see a little this centering effect where it says, I don't quite know where my eyes should go instinctively. So the software will say, it's going to be centered a bit because nothing's drawing it. So just be aware of that when you have something that might be complex or you see a centering dynamic on your execution. Now let's move around the pattern. So still same size of the individual elements, but spaced, you know, somewhat randomly. They might not be random when you put them in the execution with real visuals, but they're random here. Let's look at the heat map output here. And particularly, I'm going to call out the impact that it had on these 3 dots. See how they're distinctly more intense than the other dots? What I want to call out here is the power of negative space. Okay, so we have a lot of items around there. If you want to draw attention to something same size, give it its space to breathe. And that negative space will actually draw some of the intensity to it. Now, it's very natural here to say, all right, you may or may not want the intensity to be drawn there, but let's say we like that, or we've got an element that we want to pop. It's really tempting to say, hey, let's make it larger. Okay, so we took those same 3 dots, made them larger, and this is where a dynamic can occur to make you aware of in your own executions when you're trying to troubleshoot, when you're trying to optimize, even when you're working with SellCheck right there. Sometimes you might not get the results you expect just by making something larger. It really shows the power of that negative space. And through the AI algorithms interpretation, through the heat mapping of this, it says when I've taken that negative space away from those, it actually makes them a little less distinct from the things around, and it takes some attention elsewhere. So reinforces the power of negative space. Don't think about enlarging as a cure-all for making something more intense. You really have to understand the context of the execution and whether negative space is a more powerful tool. Maybe sometimes when you want to draw more attention to an item, you actually reduce the items around it rather than making it bigger. Let's talk about the impact of a human face. So the heat mapping software is trained to recognize the human face. It knows that we as humans are instinctively drawn to look people in the eye. Think about when you're walking down a sidewalk. Even if it's a stranger out there, you can't almost help for your eyes to just dart around. And when they dart around, they look people in the face. That's just what we are as human beings. That's how we recognize one another. So the software recognizes that, says, oh, I can tell you have a human face here, so I'm going to give it a really large portion of the focal intensity on this execution. Now, here we're doing it with dots, but if you had copy, other things around here, brand logos, that human face is still going to get quite a bit of attention. So now let's add another one. So we already know that the human face gets attention. What happens when you have a couple and they're in different areas? Well, they each draw attention, okay? As you might expect, they're going to outweigh what we get from these similarly colored dots. But one of the things I wanted to show and call out and be aware about how we allocate our vision space is that if I take this left execution, the one with a single face, and now you look at the right, just take a look at that face in the upper right. Can you see how the intensity dropped from the execution on the left to the one on the right? And then see how the intensity of the face on the bottom kind of builds up. As a matter of fact, if you look at all the dots comparing the execution on the left to the execution on the right, you'll see that all of the other dots kind of reduce their intensity. This is something really important to understand about the human vision AI capability and just how we allocate our vision space as humans. It's finite. So you say, hey, I've got great attention on this piece over here, and I want to keep that, but I want to add attention over here. It's not that simple. Everything is finite. So it's anything that you add attention to is going to be drawing attention away. Think about it as if we had 100 poker chips to allocate attention all across a space. And we have one item over here that's getting 20 poker chips worth of attention. If we add something else that's drawing attention, we're going to have to deduct chips from that pile in order for this one to get attention. So really understand that whenever you add something or add attention to something, you're going to be taking attention from something else. This can really help in optimizing hierarchy, but we've got to be mindful that it's not accretive. It's all kind of working from the same pool. Let's look at a single focal point right here. As you might expect, when I've only got one thing to look at, that's what my eye is going to be drawn to. So once again, it points out the power of negative space, but also of simplicity. When our vision has fewer things to process, we can zero in on the few things that are there and the few things that matter. So a little brief primer on sort of the background of human vision AI. What we've learned, we've got it with every one of our SellCheck reports, is that the heat maps are important inputs. They tell you where the eyes go, but not what our minds think. And this is really critical. So eyes are darting around. What's the brain doing? What's the cognitive portion of our brain doing as we begin to understand what we're looking at? What's really required is an effort to scientifically optimize the execution. Now, In our process, we will always include heat mapping as an input to the process. So you'll always receive that. But once we receive that as an input, that's where our real process of leveraging human intelligence comes into play. We will create a small specialty team to work on every project that we have coming in, every report coming in. They are all experts in their field, deeply trained in behavioral science. You can almost think of it as like an expert medical panel working on your behalf. So they take the heat mapping and your objectives, they take all of that into consideration, and then they capture their thinking in a cognitive framework that sort of marries up to how shoppers process performance marketing materials. The first element, is it seen? Does it command attention? And does the item that commands attention, does it set up the product proposition? The second C is connect. How quickly is the viewer able to recognize the brand, the category, and relate to it? The third C is convey. How quickly and how effectively are we establishing our product story? What are we trying to tell the viewer here? What do we want them to believe about our product or our proposition? And then finally, close. Have we done a great job on the first three C's, drawing the shopper in, telling a compelling story? And do we have a closing element, whether it's a claim, visualization, social proof, a promotion, anything that really helps drive that sale at that moment in time? All of those things come together to tell a more compelling and a holistic story. So let's come back to our first challenge that we had in the case study. This was the Heineken example in 2024. And we had a few options on what we'd go do. We had a few things tied for first. Let's talk through them here. One of the ideas was, well, it's unlikely to work well with two brands. They should eliminate Tecate and make this a single brand execution. Completely understandable to do that. And you're right, it would simplify the execution. Here's one of the challenges from a pragmatic standpoint. You guys have faced this in your own businesses. Tecate is contributing to this marketing effort. They're putting real dollars on the line. Some portion of their below the line spend has to go with this. So if we tell the client, hey, just drop Tecate, we're actually causing a barrier that can't be overcome. No, we have to have both of these brands in. It's part of the architecture, and they're both 0.0. So help us tell the story instead of telling us that we can't make that story. So while that is an option that would simplify it, it's not one that's going to be practically executable by the client at this point. Second option we had was make the copy bigger so it gets more attention and is not overwhelmed by the star. Well, as we learned in that exercise that we did, making it bigger might not have the benefit or the outcome that we expect of it. So there's an opportunity here that really lies in some hierarchy that we'll get to. The third option that was shared, don't show a lifestyle moment when 0.0 is a good idea, like taking a break from pickleball. Again, another good idea. However, that's a different strategy, a different concept. This whole execution is really born out of a New Year's resolution, and they're overcoming the barrier that a target shopper might think that I'm going to sacrifice flavor for my 0.0 characteristic of the product. So tasting good is what they're trying to reinforce. And while a lifestyle image showing that you can play pickleball or anything else because you're free with a 0.0 drink, while that is true, it's a completely different strategy. We basically be telling the client, hey, start over here. We have a new idea, a new strategy for you. We really want to help them work with this strategy rather than changing it. And then finally, don't change anything. The heat map indicates the beer gets attention, followed closely by the cloppy block. The heat map did indicate that, but I alluded to the issue that they have a hierarchy challenge here. And what we really want to do is get this idea of new year 0.0 and reassuring that it tastes good. So here's where we ended up landing with the client. After our full analysis included both the heat map, the SellCheck process with the panelists, the 4 C's analysis. And what we're doing here is really helping the client zone in on their strategy of saying, hey, we want to bring awareness to 0.0 in both of these lines. We want to tap into people in their New Year's resolution, and we want to overcome the purchase barrier of the fear that it might not taste good. So we're actually able to amplify that point without adding copy, without adding imagery, but just kind of giving it its space, its negative space that you see. And then another important element is we wanted a powerful sign-off. We had this messaging we wanted to isolate, but then we wanted this powerful sign-off that remembered those brands, that kind of leaves them with those brands, and the point we want them to walk away with, our selling point. All the flavor, zero alcohol. And you end up with a really nice intuitive flow, top left, across, down to this bottom right terminus point, whereas we really want to make that finishing statement. So those are the areas we went with to make the improvement. I think you can sort of see the difference there and how you're leveraging the holistic input of the heat maps, but also the human intelligence of the panelist group. Now let's take a look at the before and after of the heat maps. You see the before on the left, you see the after on the right. We're not expecting the heat map to tell us yes, no, but we want to look out for any kind of tragic changes here. You can see on this raw heat map that we still have the highest attention on the can and the star, but we've raised the intensity of this lead headline and made point. We're able to look at our areas of interest. We've upped those a little bit. We've brought the can down some. Remember, it kind of distributes, it reallocates the attention and draws a little more to that headline. And then finally, our overall flow. We're hitting the products, we're going to the headline that we want to be seen, and it maps out from there. So a good endpoint. Now that one on a relative basis is pretty simple KV that we have. We're able to move a few parts. We want to share a little trickier one, a case study with Scott's Miracle-Gro at Home Depot. And he had a really creative merchandising vehicle here. You can picture the plants out in that open area of Home Depot. There's an elevated tray where the product sits. And then this tray is surrounded on all four sides by this little poster, Miracle-Gro Post-Worthy Growth, and an imagery. I'll let you look at it a little closer there. So take a look at this execution. In this business case, Miracle-Gro had already executed this as is. So they were coming to SellCheck saying, hey, we want to anniversary this. We're going to have the same space. We're going to have the same merchandising vehicle. How do we make this piece perform even better? It worked. We just want to up it. Okay, so take a look. What might you do to improve this? Okay, we took it through the full SellCheck analysis. So on the right, you see the heat mapping outputs. Now I'm not going into detail on that because they tell a story, but that isn't the core of the story. You can see the raw heat map that we have right here, that this central area is getting some attention and our eyes darting around to some different areas. But importantly, we took that heat map input. We went through the SellCheck 4Cs process, did our full analysis, came up with recommendations as the team on how to make this work even harder on the client's behalf. So here's the original on the left. Here are the actual recommendations made by the team. The first was influenced in part by the heat map. You can see from the heat map, the eye's kind of generalized in the center, doesn't quite know where to go. So there is an opportunity to simplify. However, the panelists guide them to prioritize headline, the phone and hand image, and the logo. Other inputs, though, were really more in that human intelligence, saying, okay, let's eliminate some of this artificial looking plants and leaves that we have going around. We're trying to go for real growth. We don't want anything artificial in here, and we don't want the eye to be taken around too wide and scattered. The third recommendation was if you're going to use a single image to show benefit, and that's what they're showing on this phone right here, it needs to just knock the socks off of the viewer. They need to be seeing an image that looks so strong. It's like, oh, I can achieve that without getting Miracle-Gro's help. The fourth item is just a clarity statement. The intent of the original headline here is post-worthy growth. And you get it. It's something that you might post to Facebook or Instagram. But post-worthy isn't quite how we would talk it in reality. What you want, the emotional strategy you have here is we want to convey growth that you want to share with others. However you share it, you might be walking your neighbor over. You might just show someone a picture. Yes, you might post it, but let's broaden this share-worthy growth idea for the execution. And then finally, let's really turn that line that talks about when you use Miracle-Gro to a call to action. We're going to use an active verb, a feed with Miracle-Gro to get these results. And here's the after effect. I'll give you guys a moment to take a look at them and see the impact of the change. Look at that visualization there. Not only are you showing big growth, but you're actually showing a little usage nudge. We're saying, now this isn't just to pour it in one pot. We're going to show you how you make your garden better by utilizing Miracle-Gro. Now, judgmentally, you say, all right, you get it. The after looks stronger. The real test is the real world. And while I can't share the actual client data here, it was double-digit growth. Think about that. Same space year on year, but actually able to move the needle, even quoted from the client. I wanted to close the loop with you. It worked. We saw XX uplift versus last year. And really telling is the value to the merchant. I mean, the the retailer here wants their vendors to increase their productivity per square foot. All of a sudden, Miracle-Gro is saying, hey, we invested in order to increase the productivity here, and we're coming with a quantified, proven, scientifically improved version. And you can see how Home Depot responds to this. They talk about their own internal challenge. Without it, you end up with a washing machine full of opinions. Okay? The best of both solution is combining that human vision AI in what you're doing with the human intelligence. Okay, so getting that best of both worlds. We've shown that heat maps can show you what people see, but it takes that human intelligence to explain what it means, how it's interpreted, and how effective it's going to be at persuasion. Both can work really hard to improve your business. This is what we're working at with over 1,800 brands in over 76 countries. We'd love the opportunity to talk with you more on your end. You might already have projects with us. Let's engage in those and see how we can help. If you haven't worked with us before, reach out. We'd love to chat with you. I'm Lynn Neal, the Global Practice Officer at SellCheck. You're welcome to ping me on email at any time, or you can scan there on the barcode. Jenny, I'm looking at our time. It looks like we probably have 2 or 3 minutes left for some questions if any of them came in.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see here. Yeah, we did have a few questions. One of the first ones was, would you recommend a combined approach for all work, the AI and the HI, or only high stake launches?
No, it's a great question. Our process always involves both. You get that input on coming in, and it turns around in just a couple of days, so it moves really fast. There are some options out there that are heat map alone. I think they work good as an aid to judgment and facilitating some internal discussion. I'll tell you what we find our clients generally use us for is they'll use us at the key visual stage. You know, are we on the right direction? Can we optimize this before we fan it out in other directions? And then they'll make sure they utilize us at some of their highest investment efforts. The purchase hurdle rate is really low. It's a good value there, but you know, you don't want to be turning around all day with a bunch of different reports. So what they'll make sure they do is invest in their areas that they're going to have the largest investment on their production or largest deployment into the retail, and they'll run those to make sure they're optimized.
Got it. That's great.
Super.
Lynn, another question, is this more about reducing risk or driving upside, would you say?
I'd say yes to both. I think it works as an insurance policy for some. We work with a lot of people in packaging. They might be doing a packaging update. You know, there's a risk of how do we bring over our current users while inspiring new ones. So they want to mitigate risk on that. For many, it is upside. The Miracle-Gro, for example, right here was pure upside. You know, we've already had this 1 year. We want to come back next year and anniversary it and make it better. So a number of our clients might look at their advertising calendar, and even though they're making some tweaks every year, they know they're going to have a back to school event. They know they're going to have a Christmas event. There's something they did last year. So it might be taking that and upping it. Okay, how do we make that better? There might be new product launches. How do we make sure that's successful? In that case, it's mitigating risk while trying to maximize sales.
Got it. That's great. Maybe time for, we're at the half-hour mark, but sneak one more question.
One more. Great if we have it.
Does SellCheck's process catch strategic errors that heat maps miss?
It's not explicitly designed to do that, but yes, it often does. Recall from the heat maps, we're getting sort of what the eye is seeing and instinctively drawn to. It takes the human intelligence to decipher, okay, what's your place in the marketplace? What are you trying to achieve? What are your watch lists going for? So we will often, as a part of our work, be able to call out strategic implications of what folks are looking at. An example of what we talked about, the Heineken that had the 0.0, and I talked about, well, they could show a lifestyle of doing pickleball. If Heineken had come out and saying, hey, we want to start off New Year's resolutions, we want to confirm, show people that we taste great, but then they had showed us a pickleball execution, which is about lifestyle. Our process sort of calls a timeout and says, hey, let's talk with you here. Your execution showing pickleball is not going to be able to as effectively deliver your taste great. So we've got an issue with execution and what you've said is your communication idea. So our process inherently bakes that into the analysis. Great question.
Got it. Good. Well, I think that's about it. And we're at time, so we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and a big thank you to you, Lynn, for sharing your expertise and perspective with us today. If you do have any follow-up questions or want to continue the conversation, we'd love to hear from you, so go ahead and reach out. Today's session, as we mentioned at the beginning, was recorded, and you'll receive that recording via email shortly. Thanks again, everyone, for spending time with us, and enjoy the rest of your day.